Dr. Lisa Monroe stood at the observation deck of the USS Healing Light, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the screen. Kepler 442 looked peaceful from space, but she knew the truth was different. War had torn this world apart for 3 years now. The Zephyrian Empire was fighting a brutal civil war, and millions of innocent people were caught in the middle. "Dr. Monroe, we'll reach orbit in 2 hours," said Captain Ryan Foster as he walked up beside her. His face showed the same worry she felt. They both knew this mission was dangerous, but someone had to help the people down there. Lisa nodded and checked her medical supplies list again. The USS Healing Light was Earth's newest hospital ship. It had the best medical equipment humans had ever built. White crosses were painted on every side of the ship, marking it as a medical vessel. Under every law of war in the galaxy, no one was supposed to attack hospital ships. "Are you sure about this, Doc?" Captain Foster asked quietly. "Admiral Carter's fleet is 2 days away. We could wait for them." Lisa shook her head. "People are dying right now. Every hour we wait, more innocent lives are lost. We came here to help, not to hide behind warships." She walked through the medical bay, checking on her team. Dr. Kevin Price was preparing the main surgery room. He had been her friend since medical school, as she trusted him with the hardest cases. Kevin was quiet and serious, but his hands could work miracles during operations. "How are we looking, Kevin?" Lisa asked. "All surgery rooms are ready. We have enough supplies for 500 major operations, plus basic care for thousands more," Kevin replied without looking up from his instruments. He was always focused when lives were at stake. Nurse Commander Amy Davis was training the medical staff on alien biology. The Corvani refugees they would be treating were very different from humans. They had green scales that looked like emeralds and could change colors to show their feelings. Their hearts were in different places, and their blood was blue instead of red. "Remember, Corvani children are much smaller than human children," Amy explained to the nurses. "But they are also much stronger. Be gentle but firm when treating them. They can sense fear through smell, so stay calm no matter what you see." Amy had worked with alien patients before. She was one of the few humans who could communicate with the Corvani using their light patterns. The Corvani spoke with sounds like humans, but they also used the colored lights on their scales to show emotions and ideas. Jake Sullivan was checking all the medical equipment in the storage rooms. As the chief medical technician, he made sure every machine worked perfectly. Jake was young but skilled with technology. He could fix anything from a simple scanner to the most complex life support systems. "Jake, how are our supplies?" Lisa asked. "We're good to go, Doc. I've got backup systems for everything important. Even if we lose main power, we can keep patients alive for days," Jake said with a confident smile. Lisa felt proud of her team. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing it was dangerous. Earth had sent them here as part of a peace mission. The Corvani were refugees from their own civil war, and many were badly injured. Human medicine was more advanced than Corvani medicine, so Earth decided to help. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "This is Admiral Ben Carter of the Earth Defense Fleet, USS Healing Light. Please respond." Captain Foster answered the call. "This is Captain Foster. We're about to begin our medical mission. Admiral." "Captain, I'm tracking 3 Zephyrian destroyers, moving toward your position. They'll reach you in 18 hours. I strongly recommend you wait for my fleet before beginning operations." Admiral Carter's voice sounded worried. Lisa stepped forward. "Admiral, this is Dr. Monroe. We have reports of critically injured Corvani refugees who need immediate medical attention. Every hour we wait, more of them die." "Doctor, I understand your concerns, but the Zephyrians view the Corvani as traitors. They might not respect your medical neutrality," Admiral Carter warned. "Admiral, we're a clearly marked hospital ship. Under the Geneva Convention and the Galactic Medical Accords, we're protected. No civilized species attacks medical personnel." Lisa replied firmly. There was a pause before Admiral Carter spoke again. "Doctor, the Zephyrians may not be as civilized as we hope. Please be careful down there." As the USS Healing Light entered orbit, Lisa could see the damage on the planet's surface. Entire cities were in ruins. Smoke rose from dozens of locations where battles were still happening. Refugee camps dotted the landscape, filled with millions of displaced people. The first transport shuttles arrived within an hour, Lisa watched through the medical bay windows as the injured Corvani were brought aboard. She had seen pictures of the Corvani before, but seeing them in person was different. They were beautiful creatures with scales that shifted from green to blue to purple depending on their mood. Even injured and afraid, they moved with natural grace. The first patient was a young Corvani female who had been caught in a bombing. Her left arm was badly burned, and she was unconscious. Lisa and Kevin worked together to clean her wounds and apply healing gel. The Corvani's scales around the injury had turned black, which Amy explained meant she was in great pain. "She's going to be okay," Kevin said softly as he finished bandaging the arm. "The burns are serious, but not life-threatening." As more patients arrived, Lisa saw the true cost of the war. Children with missing limbs. Elderly Corvani who had been poisoned by chemical weapons. Families torn apart by the violence. But she also saw something else, hope. The Corvani patients looked at the human doctors with grateful eyes. Their scales brightened when they realized the humans were there to help. Amy worked with a young Corvani boy whose parents had been killed in the fighting. He was scared and alone, but Amy sat with him and learned his name, Kixtel. She used her limited knowledge of Corvani light language to comfort him, making soft yellow patterns with a special light device. "He says thank you," Amy translated, as the boy's scales shifted to warm gold. "He wants to know if we're angels," Lisa smiled sadly. "Tell him we're just doctors. We're here to help him get better." Jake was everywhere at once, making sure all the medical equipment worked perfectly. He had rigged up special beds for the Corvani patients, since their bodies were shaped differently than humans. He also set up translation devices so the doctors could communicate better with their patients. As the day went on, more and more patients arrived. The medical bay filled with the sounds of healing, the hum of medical scanners, the quiet voices of doctors and nurses, and the gentle musical tones the Corvani made when they were comfortable. Lisa was working on a difficult surgery when Captain Foster's voice came over the intercom. "Dr. Monroe, please report to the bridge immediately." Lisa finished cleaning the patient's wound and handed the operation to Kevin. "Keep her stable. I'll be right back." On the bridge, Captain Foster pointed to the long-range sensors. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. There's HFY destroyers, and they're heading straight for us. Lisa looked at the display. The enemy ships were still far away, but they were moving fast. "How long do we have?" 6 hours, maybe less, Foster replied. "Admiral Carter is still 2 days away." Lisa thought about all the patients in the medical bay, the little boy Kixtel who had lost his parents, the female with the burned arm who was just starting to heal, hundreds of injured Corvani who needed their help. "We're not leaving," Lisa said firmly. "We're a medical ship. We're protected by every law of war in the galaxy. The Zephyrians wouldn't dare attack a hospital ship." Captain Foster looked worried. "Doctor, these are dangerous people. They've been fighting a civil war for 3 years. They might not care about the rules." "Then we'll have to trust that some honor still exists in this galaxy," Lisa replied. "Those people down there are counting on us. I won't abandon them." As the USS Healing Light continued its mercy mission, the 3 Zephyrian destroyers grew closer. Lisa returned to the medical bay, not knowing that in a few hours everything would change forever. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone attacked Earth's healers. The 3 Zephyrian destroyers appeared on the USS Healing Light screens like dark shadows against the stars. They were sleek and deadly, built for war rather than mercy. Captain Foster stood on the bridge, watching the enemy ships grow larger as they approached. "They're hailing us," said Lieutenant Carol Webb from the communications station. Her voice was tight with worry. "Put them through," Foster ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a Zephyrian commander. The alien looked like a giant lizard that walked on 2 legs. His scales were dark red with black stripes, and his eyes glowed yellow. Sharp teeth filled his mouth when he spoke. "Human vessel, you are harboring enemies of the Zephyrian Empire? Surrender all Corvani refugees immediately for processing." The commander's voice was cold and harsh. Captain Foster stepped forward. "This is Captain Ryan Foster of the USS Healing Light. We are a medical vessel operating under the protection of the Galactic Medical Accords. Our patients are under our care and protection." The Zephyrian commander's eyes narrowed. "There are no patients here, only traitors and the weak humans who help them. You have 1 hour to surrender the Corvani or face the consequences." "We will not surrender our patients," Foster replied firmly. "They are sick and injured people who need medical care. We are protected by every law of war in the galaxy." The alien commander made a sound like an angry snake. "Your laws mean nothing to us. The Corvani chose to fight against the Empire. That makes them our enemies, and anyone who helps them is also our enemy." The communication ended with a sharp click. Foster immediately contacted Admiral Carter, but the nearest Earth fleet was still more than a day away. They were completely alone. In the medical bay, Dr. Lisa Monroe was working on her most difficult case yet. A young Corvani mother named Solara had been caught in a bombing attack. Her injuries were severe, and her baby was also hurt. Lisa had been operating for 3 hours, trying to save both mother and child. "How are they doing?" asked Dr. Kevin Price as he checked the monitors. "The mother is stable, but the baby is in critical condition," Lisa replied without looking up from her work. "I need another 2 hours to complete the surgery." Jake Sullivan was helping with the operation, monitoring all the life support systems. The baby was so small and fragile, barely bigger than Lisa's hand. Its tiny scales were pale blue, which Amy had explained meant it was very sick. "Doctor, the baby's heart rate is dropping," Jake warned. Lisa worked faster, her hands moving with practice skill. She had delivered hundreds of human babies, but this was different. Corvani babies develop differently than human babies, and one mistake could kill the little one. Amy Davis was in another part of the medical bay, taking care of the boy Kickstall. He was getting better, but he was still scared and alone. Amy had learned more of the Corvani light language and could now have simple conversations with him. "The scary ship's outside," Kickstall said, his scales flashing worried purple patterns. "They want to hurt us." "Don't worry," Amy said gently, making calm yellow lights with her device. "We won't let anyone hurt you. The human doctors are very strong and brave." But Amy was worried too. She had heard Captain Foster's announcement about the Zephyrian ultimatum. Every human on the ship knew they were in danger, but none of them wanted to abandon their patients. Captain Foster's voice came over the intercom. "All medical staff, this is the captain. We are under threat from enemy forces. However, we will not abandon our patients. We are a medical vessel, and we will continue our mission." Lisa felt proud of her captain. He was risking his life and his ship to protect the Corvani refugees. This was what being human meant, standing up for those who couldn't protect themselves. The hour passed quickly. Lisa was still working on the baby when the Zephyrian ships moved closer. Captain Foster tried to contact them again, but they wouldn't answer. "They're powering up their weapons," Lieutenant Webb reported from the bridge. "All 3 ships are targeting us." Foster activated the ship's defensive shields. The USS Healing Light wasn't built for fighting, but it had basic protection systems. "This is insane," he said to himself. "No one attacks a hospital ship." The first blast hit the ship's left side. The USS Healing Light shook violently, throwing people to the floor. Emergency lights started flashing red, and alarms began to sound throughout the ship. "Shield strength down to 60%, Webb reported. "They're targeting our medical bay." Lisa was thrown against the operating table but kept working. The baby's life depended on her finishing the surgery. "Jake, keep those monitors steady," she ordered. The second blast was stronger. It hit the ship's main power systems, causing the lights to flicker. Several patients were thrown from their beds, and medical equipment crashed to the floor. "This is impossible," Kevin said in shock. "They're actually attacking a medical ship." Amy was trying to calm the frightened patients. The Corvani were making high-pitched sounds of terror, and their scales were flashing bright red warning colors. Many of them were too injured to move, making them helpless targets. The third blast hit the main medical bay directly. The explosion was enormous, tearing through the ship's hull like paper. Lisa was thrown across the room by the force of the blast. She hit the wall hard and fell to the floor, not moving. "Dr. Monroe!" Jake screamed, but there was no answer. Lisa lay still, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. The woman who had dedicated her life to saving others was gone. Kevin tried to reach Lisa, but debris was falling everywhere. A large piece of metal fell from the ceiling, crushing him instantly. The man who had gentle hands and could work miracles was killed trying to help his patients. The ship's hull was torn open, and the vacuum of space began pulling everything out. Emergency force fields activated, but they were failing. Jake managed to grab onto a support beam, but he was badly injured. Blood was flowing from a cut on his head. The Zephyrian ships moved closer and began launching boarding pods. The enemy soldiers wore heavy armor and carried powerful weapons. They blasted their way through the ship's damaged hull and entered the medical bay. Amy was trying to protect little Kickstall when the first Zephyrian soldier appeared. The alien was huge, almost 7 feet tall, with dark armor covered in spikes. His weapon was aimed directly at the boy. "Please, he's just a child," Amy begged. "He's hurt and scared." The soldier looked at her with cold yellow eyes. "Oh, Corvani, our enemies of the Empire." Amy threw herself in front of Kickstall just as the soldier fired. The energy blast hit her in the chest, killing her instantly. She fell backward, her body shielding the little boy she had tried to save. The Zephyrian soldiers moved through the medical bay like a plague of death. They shot every Corvani patient they found, even those who were unconscious or too injured to move. The mother Solara and her baby were killed in their beds, along with dozens of other innocent people. Jake watched in horror from his hiding place behind some fallen equipment. He managed to activate his medical tablet and started recording everything. The tablet's camera captured the soldiers executing helpless patients, destroying medical equipment, and laughing as they did it. One soldier found the young Kickstall hiding under Amy's body. The boy was crying and his scales were flashing desperate colors, begging for mercy. The soldier raised his weapon, but Jake couldn't watch anymore. He closed his eyes and heard the terrible sound of energy weapons firing when the killing was finished. The Zephyrian commander walked through the destroyed medical bay. He stepped over Lisa's body without looking down, as if she was nothing more than garbage. He activated his communication device and spoke to his fleet. "All enemies have been eliminated. The human medical facility has been destroyed. Let this be a warning to all who would help the enemies of the Empire." The Zephyrian soldiers planted explosives throughout the ship before leaving. Jake, barely conscious and covered in blood, managed to crawl to an escape pod. He activated the pod's emergency beacon and ejected from the dying ship just as the explosives went off. The USS Healing Light, the ship that had carried hope and healing to a war-torn world, was destroyed completely. The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a terrible star. Jake's escape pod drifted away from the wreckage, carrying the only human survivor and the recorded proof of what had happened. The galaxy was about to learn that some lines should never be crossed. The Zephyrians had just made the worst mistake in their species' history. They had attacked Earth's healers, and humanity would never forget or forgive what had been done to the people who only wanted to help others. In the cold vacuum of space, pieces of the hospital ship floated like tombstones. Among the debris were medical instruments, broken beds, and the bodies of people who had died trying to heal rather than harm. The universe had just become a much more dangerous place for those who chose compassion over cruelty. The emergency beacon from Jake Sullivan's escape pod was picked up by an Earth patrol ship 12 hours after the USS Healing Light was destroyed. When rescue teams found Jake floating in the wreckage, he was barely alive. His injuries were severe, but he clutched his medical tablet like it was the most precious thing in the universe. "The recording," Jake whispered to the rescue medic who was treating him. "You have to see the recording. They killed everyone. They killed the doctors. The tablet contained 47 minutes of footage showing the attack on the hospital ship. The rescue team watched in stunned silence as Zephyrian soldiers executed wounded patients and murdered medical staff. The images were so horrible that several experienced military officers had to leave the room within 6 hours. The recording reached Earth. President Helen Brooks was in a cabinet meeting when her security chief, General Paul Hayes, burst into the room without knocking. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. "Madam President, you need to see this immediately," Hayes said. Setting up a secure tablet on the conference table, President Brooks watched the recording in complete silence. She saw Dr. Lisa Monroe thrown against the wall by the explosion. She watched Kevin Price crushed by falling debris as he tried to help his patients. She saw Amy Davis shot down while protecting a frightened child. Most horrible of all, she saw Zephyrian soldiers laughing as they executed helpless patients in their hospital beds. When the recording ended, the room was completely quiet. President Brooks stood up slowly, her face hard as stone. "How many people were on that ship?" 437 humans, Madam President. "Plus over 800 Corvani patients," Hayes replied. "And survivors?" "Just Jake Sullivan. Everyone else is dead." President Brooks walked to the window and looked out at the city. People were going about their normal lives, not knowing that something terrible had just happened in space. She thought about Dr. Monroe and her team who had volunteered to risk their lives to help alien refugees. They had died because they believed in helping others. "General Hayes, I want you to call an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. I want every nation's representative there within 4 hours," she said firmly. "Yes, Madam President." "What should I tell them?" "Tell them we're going to war." The emergency session of the UN Security Council was unlike anything in human history. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in New York. The Great Hall was packed with world leaders, military commanders and diplomats. Everyone knew something major had happened, but few knew exactly what. President Brooks stood at the podium, her face grim. Behind her was a massive screen showing the image of the USS Healing Light, with its bright white medical crosses clearly visible. "Fellow leaders of Earth," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. 24 hours ago, this hospital ship was attacked and destroyed by forces of the Zephyrian Empire. 437 humans died, along with over 800 alien refugees they were trying to help. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Hospital ships were sacred in human culture. No civilized nation had attacked a medical vessel in over a century. "The attack was deliberate," President Brooks continued. "The Zephyrians knew exactly what they were doing. They targeted medical personnel who were healing the wounded and protecting refugees." She activated the screen behind her. "I'm going to show you what happened. I warn you that these images are disturbing." The recording from Jake's tablet played on the giant screen. The hall fell silent as world leaders watched the systematic murder of doctors, nurses, and patients. When Amy Davis was shot while trying to protect the little boy, several delegates began to cry. When the soldiers executed wounded patients in their beds, angry voices filled the hall. President Brooks let the recording play until the end. When it was over, she looked out at the assembled leaders. "This is not just an attack on Americans. This is an attack on the very idea that some people choose to heal rather than harm. This is an attack on everything we believe in as human beings." The Chinese representative, Premier Liu Chun, stood up. "China will contribute our entire space fleet to any military response." The Russian President, Viktor Petrov, was next. "Russia stands with our American allies. Our ships are ready for war." One by one, every nation pledged their support. The European Union promised their advanced technology. The African Unity Council offered their mineral resources. The Pan-Asian Maritime Alliance provided their fastest ships. Even the smallest nations contributed what they could. "We have never been united like this before," President Brooks said, her voice filled with emotion. "But we have never faced an enemy who attacks our healers. Today, we become one people with one purpose." Fleet Admiral Marcus Stone was given. command of the largest military force in human history. He was a veteran of 3 wars and had never lost a battle. Standing in the Pentagon's war room, he looked at the screens showing ships from every nation on Earth. "How many ships do we have?" Stone asked his aide, Colonel Nancy Clark. 2,147 vessels, sir, from tiny patrol boats to massive battleships. Every nation has contributed something, Clark replied. Stone nodded slowly. And how long to reach the Zephyrian fleet? 6 days at maximum. Speed, sir? Then we have 6 days to turn this collection of ships into a fighting force. The mobilization was incredible to watch. Civilian shipyards worked around the clock to convert merchant vessels into warships. Weapons factories ran 24 hours a day. Millions of people volunteered to serve in the military. The entire planet seemed to be preparing for war. Captain Sandra Lewis was given command of the USS Vengeance, Earth's newest and most powerful battleship. She had been Dr. Monroe's roommate in college and had heard about the attack while visiting her family. When she volunteered to lead the assault fleet, her superior officers didn't hesitate to approve. "They killed Lisa," Sandra said to her crew as they prepared for departure. "They killed a woman who spent her life saving others. They killed her while she was trying to help alien children. I cannot stand." General Tony Rodriguez was put in charge of the ground forces. He had fought in conflicts all over Earth and was known for his tactical brilliance. When he heard about the attack on the medical ship, he immediately requested assignment to the mission. "We're not just fighting for revenge," Rodriguez told his officers. "We're fighting to show the galaxy that some things are sacred. Medical personnel, refugees, children, these are not military targets. Any species that attacks healers will face the full might of humanity." The news of the attack spread across Earth through every media channel. The footage from Jake's tablet was shown on television, the internet, and public screens in every major city. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Protests filled the streets of every major city on Earth, but they weren't protests against war. They were protests demanding justice for the murdered medical staff. People carried signs with pictures of Dr. Monroe, Dr. Price, and Amy Davis. They called them heroes and martyrs. In hospitals around the world, doctors and nurses held memorial services for their colleagues who had died trying to help others. Medical schools organized fundraisers to support the families of the victims. The entire medical community was united in grief and anger. Jake Sullivan, recovering in a military hospital, received thousands of messages from people around the world. They thanked him for surviving and for recording the evidence of the attack. Many people called him a hero, but Jake didn't feel like a hero. He felt like the only person who had failed to save his friends. "I should have done more," Jake said to the military psychologist who was helping him recover. "I should have tried to help them. You did exactly what you needed to do," the doctor replied. "You survived and you got the evidence. Because of you, the world knows what happened. Because of you, those monsters will face justice." Dr. Richard Young, the head of Earth's medical corps, made a speech that was broadcast to every nation. He had trained many of the doctors who died on the USS. Healing light, and his voice shook with emotion as he spoke. "Today we mourn our fallen colleagues," Young said. "Dr. Lisa Monroe, Dr. Kevin Price, Amy Davis, and all the others who died trying to heal the wounded. They were not soldiers, but they showed more courage than any warrior. They went to a dangerous place to help strangers, and they died protecting those who could not protect themselves." He paused, wiping tears from his eyes. "But their deaths will not be in vain. Today, humanity shows the galaxy that we protect those who heal, we defend those who help others, and we will make sure that no one ever attacks medical personnel again." The fleet that assembled in Earth's orbit was a sight that would be remembered forever. Ships from every nation flew together under a unified command. The largest vessel was the USS Vengeance, bristling with weapons and carrying the hopes of an entire planet. The smallest was a converted medical ship volunteered by a small island nation. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the greatest armada in human history. He thought about the doctors and nurses who had died trying to help others. He thought about the little boy who had been murdered in his hospital bed. He thought about the message they needed to send to the galaxy. All ships, this is Admiral Stone. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system like an angry storm. 2,000 ships appeared at once, their weapons powered and their crews ready for battle. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship. Looking at the tactical display that showed the enemy forces, the Zephyrians had been busy during the 6 days. Since they destroyed the USS Healing Light, their small group of 3 destroyers had grown into a full battle fleet of 30 warships. They were spread out across the system, confident that their superior numbers and technology would be enough to defeat any human response. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Dave Miller. "Put it through," Stone ordered. The main screen showed the same Zephyrian commander who had destroyed the hospital ship. High Admiral Vextar looked even more arrogant than before, his red and black scales gleaming under the lights of his bridge. "So the humans have come to die for their precious healers," Vextar said with a voice like grinding metal. "You're medical. Ship was weak, just like your entire species. You should have learned your lesson and stayed away." Admiral Stone stepped forward, his face calm but his eyes burning with controlled anger. "High Admiral Vextar, you are guilty of war crimes against medical personnel and civilians. Surrender now and you will receive a fair trial. Refuse and face the consequences." Vextar made a sound like an angry snake laughing. "You bring toy. Ships against the might of the Zephyrian Empire. We have 30 warships with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. You humans are weak creatures who care more about healing than fighting. We will crush you like we crushed your pathetic hospital." "Ship, you made one mistake," Stone replied quietly. "You attacked people who only wanted to help others. You killed healers. And now you're going to learn what happens when you cross that line." The transmission ended and Stone turned to his crew. "All ships, battle stations. Today we show the galaxy that humanity protects its healers." Captain Sandra Lewis commanded the USS Vengeance, the most advanced battleship in the human fleet. She had studied every detail of the recording from Jake's tablet, memorizing the face of every Zephyrian soldier who had murdered her friend Lisa Monroe. Her ship was at the front of the attack formation, ready to lead the charge. "Weapon systems online," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Emma Stone. "All missile tubes loaded and ready." "Good," Sandra replied. "Today we fight for everyone who chooses to heal instead of harm." General Tony Rodriguez was aboard the assault carrier USS Justice, commanding 500 fighter ships. His pilots were the best from every nation on Earth, united by their shared anger at the attack on medical personnel. They knew this battle was about more than military victory. It was about defending human values. "All fighter squadrons, this is General Rodriguez," he broadcast to his pilots. "Remember why we're here. Those monsters killed doctors and nurses who were trying to save alien children. They executed wounded patients in their beds. Today, we make sure they never hurt another healer." The Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation, confident in their superior numbers. Their ships were larger and more heavily armed than most human vessels. Their commanders had fought many battles and won them all. They expected this fight to be easy. High Admiral Vextar watched the human fleet approach on his tactical display. The human ships looked small and weak compared to his mighty destroyers. He had fought dozens of species across the galaxy, and none had ever stood against Zephyrian military might for long. "Begin the attack," Vextar ordered. "Show these weak humans what happens to those who oppose the Empire." The battle began with the Zephyrians firing their long-range weapons. Massive energy beams reached across space, striking several human ships. The USS Denver, a converted cargo vessel, took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire. 23 humans died in the first seconds of the fight, but the human fleet didn't break or retreat. Instead, they spread out and began using tactics the Zephyrians had never seen before. Small groups of ships worked together, covering each other and sharing defensive fire. When one ship was damaged, others moved to protect it. Their formation is strange, observed Vexstar's tactical officer. They're not fighting like a military fleet. They're fighting like... Like what? Vexstar demanded. Like a rescue team, sir. Each ship is protecting the others like they're trying to save wounded comrades. Captain Lewis led the USS Vengeance in a daring attack on the Zephyrian left flank. Her ship was fast and heavily armed, and she used it like a surgical knife, cutting through the enemy formation. Behind her came 6 destroyers from the European Defense Fleet, their weapons coordinated perfectly with hers. "Target the ship that destroyed the hospital ship," Lewis ordered. "I want Vexstar's flagship." The USS Vengeance fired all its weapons at once. Missiles, energy beams, and railgun projectiles struck the Zephyrian flagship's shields. The enemy ship rocked under the assault, but its defenses held. General Rodriguez launched his fighter attack at the same moment. 500 small ships swarmed toward the Zephyrian fleet like angry wasps. The enemy had powerful weapons, but they were designed to fight large ships, not tiny fighters that moved like lightning. Jake Sullivan, despite his injuries, had insisted on joining the battle as a tactical advisor. He was aboard Admiral Stone's flagship, watching the battle and providing intelligence about Zephyrian weaknesses he had observed during the attack on the hospital ship. "Admiral, I noticed something when they boarded our ship," Jake said, pointing to his tablet. "Their shields have a gap in the lower rear section. It's small, but if we can hit it with precision weapons..." Stone nodded and immediately broadcast the information to all human ships. "All vessels, target enemy ships at coordinates Jake 7. Concentrate fire on the lower rear shield sections." The human fleet adjusted their attacks, focusing on the weakness Jake had discovered. One by one, Zephyrian ships began to take damage as human weapons found the gaps in their defenses. The aliens had superior technology, but the humans had something more valuable. They were fighting for a cause they believed in. The tide of battle began to turn when Captain Lewis's ship broke through the Zephyrian defensive line. The USS Vengeance was damaged and scarred, but it kept fighting. Lewis aimed all her weapons at a Zephyrian heavy cruiser and fired everything at once. The enemy ship's shields collapsed under the assault. Lewis's weapons tore through the hull, causing massive explosions inside the vessel. The Zephyrian cruiser spun out of control and crashed into an asteroid, killing everyone aboard. "That's for Dr. Monroe," Lewis said quietly, General Rodriguez's. Fighters were everywhere at once, striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. They worked in perfect coordination, each pilot knowing exactly where the others were and what they were doing. It was like watching a deadly dance performed by hundreds of partners. The Zephyrians began to realize they were in serious trouble. Their superior numbers and technology weren't enough against humans who fought with such determination and skill. Every human ship that was destroyed seemed to make the others fight even harder. "How are they doing this?" Vexstar demanded as another of his ships exploded. "They're just humans. They should be weak and scared." "Sir, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered before," his tactical officer replied. "They're not trying to conquer us or steal our territory. They're fighting for revenge? They want to punish us for killing their medical personnel." Vexstar's scales darkened with anger. "Impossible. No species fights this hard for healers. Warriors are what matter, not weak medical staff." But the evidence was right in front of him. The human fleet was taking terrible losses, but they never stopped attacking. When the USS Portland was crippled by enemy fire, 3 other ships immediately moved to protect it while damage control teams worked to save the crew. When the European destroyer HMS Churchill was surrounded by enemy vessels, a dozen human ships broke formation to rescue it. Admiral Stone watched the battle from his command center, coordinating the attacks of over 2,000 ships. He could see that the humans were winning, but the cost was high. Hundreds of good people were dying to avenge the murder of medical personnel. "Sir, the Zephyrian fleet is starting to break apart," reported his tactical officer. "They're losing coordination." Stone nodded. "Focus our attacks on their flagship. If we can capture Vexstar alive, he can stand trial for his crimes. The final phase of the battle was brutal. The remaining Zephyrian ships formed a defensive circle around their flagship, but the human fleet attacked from all sides at once. General Rodriguez's fighters swarmed over the enemy vessels like a cloud of metal insects, while Captain Lewis led the heavy ships in a crushing assault. Vexstar's flagship was surrounded and outnumbered, its shields failing under the constant bombardment. The Zephyrian commander finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had attacked the healers of a species that would cross the galaxy to avenge them. "All ships surrender immediately," Admiral Stone broadcast to the remaining Zephyrian vessels. "You are outnumbered and outgunned. Further resistance is pointless." One by one, the surviving Zephyrian ships powered down their weapons and surrendered. Their crews knew they had lost more than just a battle. High Admiral Vexstar stood in chains aboard the human flagship, surrounded by guards from 12 different Earth nations. His red and black scales had turned dull gray, the color of defeat and shame among his people. The mighty Zephyrian commander, who had laughed at human weakness, now looked like a broken old lizard. Admiral Marcus Stone entered the holding cell, followed by Jake Sullivan and Captain Sandra Lewis. Vexstar looked up at them with yellow eyes that no longer held any arrogance. The weight of his defeat pressed down on him like a mountain. "You fought well," Vexstar said quietly. "I underestimated your species completely." "You made one critical error," Admiral Stone replied. "You thought compassion was weakness. You thought people who heal others couldn't fight. You learned differently." Vexstar nodded slowly. "In all my years of war, I have never seen a species fight so hard for their medical personnel. Most races abandon their healers when battle begins. You crossed the galaxy to avenge yours." Jake Sullivan stepped forward, still wearing bandages from his injuries. "You killed people who were trying to save children. You murdered doctors who had dedicated their lives to helping others. Did you really think there would be no consequences?" "I thought humans were weak," Vexstar admitted. "I thought you cared too much about the injured and the helpless to be effective warriors. I was wrong." Captain Lewis looked at the defeated alien with cold eyes. "Dr. Lisa Monroe was my friend. She spent her whole life learning how to save people. You killed her while she was performing surgery on an alien baby. You will face trial for that crime." The trial of High Admiral Vexstar and his surviving officers took place on the planet New Geneva, home to the Galactic Court of Justice. Representatives from hundreds of species came to witness the proceedings. It was the first time in galactic history that war crimes against medical personnel had been prosecuted on such a scale. The courtroom was packed with delegates from across known space. The Corvani sent a large delegation, led by Elder Kethanel, whose own daughter had been one of the patients killed on the USS Healing Light. The Altarians, the Centauri Republic, and dozens of other civilizations sent observers to watch the trial. Judge Patricia Wong, Earth's most respected legal expert, presided over the court. She had been chosen because of her reputation for fairness and her deep knowledge of interspecies law. The evidence against the Zephyrians was overwhelming, but she wanted to ensure the trial was conducted properly. "This court will determine whether the defendants violated the fundamental laws of war by deliberately attacking medical personnel and civilians," Judge Wong announced as the trial began. "The charges are among the most serious in galactic law." Jake Sullivan was the star witness. He testified for 3 days, describing in detail what he had seen aboard the USS Healing Light. His recording was played in the courtroom, showing the systematic murder of patients and medical staff. Many spectators left the room when the footage showed children being executed in their hospital beds. "They knew exactly what they were doing," Jake testified. "They targeted the medical bay specifically. They killed wounded patients who couldn't defend themselves. They laughed while they did it." Dr. Richard Young testified about the importance of medical neutrality in interspecies relations. He explained how hospital ships had been protected by law for centuries, and why attacking medical personnel was considered one of the worst possible war crimes. Medical staff take an oath to help all people, regardless of their species or nationality. Dr. Yang said, "They risked their lives to save others. When someone attacks healers, they attack the very foundation of civilized society. Elder Kethanel gave the most emotional testimony. The elderly Corvani spoke about his daughter Solara, who had been killed along with her baby while under human medical care. His scales shifted through colors of grief as he described how the human doctors had worked tirelessly to save Corvani lives. The humans asked for nothing in return, Kethanel said through a translator. They risked their own lives to help our people. Dr. Monroe died trying to save my grandchild. The humans who came to help us were heroes, and the Zephyrians who killed them are monsters. Vextar and his officers offered no real defense. They claimed they were following military orders, but even their own lawyers admitted that attacking medical personnel was wrong. The evidence was too clear and the witnesses too credible for any reasonable doubt. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury of judges from 15 different species found all the defendants guilty of war crimes. Judge Wong sentenced Vextar to life imprisonment, while his officers received sentences ranging from 20 to 50 years. You have been found guilty of the most serious crimes in galactic law, Judge Wong told Vextar during sentencing. You deliberately targeted medical personnel who were providing humanitarian aid. You murdered wounded civilians, including children. Your actions violated every principle of civilized warfare, but the trial was only part of the story. The real impact of the battle came from how quickly news of humanity's response spread across the galaxy. Within weeks, every species in known space had heard about the humans who crossed the void to avenge their murdered healers. The story was told differently by each species, but the core message was always the same. Humans were not the strongest or most advanced species in the galaxy, but they were the only ones who would fight to the death to protect those who healed rather than harmed. The Altarians, a warrior culture that respected strength above all else, were amazed by humanity's military response. Their war songs now included verses about the human fleet that destroyed a superior enemy force to avenge fallen medical personnel. The peaceful Delphinians, who had suffered attacks on their own hospitals during past conflicts, declared humans to be their permanent allies. They erected statues of Dr. Monroe and her team in their capital city, honoring them as martyrs for the cause of universal medical care. Even the warlike Grexians, humanity's former enemies, expressed grudging respect for the human response. They admitted that they had never fought so hard for non-warriors, and they began to reconsider their own treatment of medical personnel. The Corvani reaction was the most touching. Elder Kethanel led a ceremony on the ruins of Kepler 442b, where a monument was built to honor the USS Healing Light and its crew. The monument was made of crystallized Corvani tears, which turned different colors based on the emotions of those who viewed it. The inscription on the monument was written in dozens of languages. They came as healers, they died as heroes, they were avenged as family. But perhaps the most important result was the establishment of new galactic laws protecting medical personnel. The Monroe Protocols, named after Dr. Lisa Monroe, made attacks on medical ships and personnel a crime punishable by the combined military forces of all member species. Admiral Stone was promoted to head the new Galactic Medical Protection Force, an international organization dedicated to safeguarding humanitarian missions across the galaxy. Captain Lewis became his deputy, while General Rodriguez was put in charge of training rapid response teams. Jake Sullivan recovered from his injuries and returned to medical service, but now he served aboard military vessels that protected hospital ships. He carried a small photo of Dr. Monroe, Dr. Price, and Amy Davis with him wherever he went, never forgetting the friends who had died trying to help others. The USS Healing Light was never rebuilt, but its name lived on. A new class of hospital ships was named after Dr. Monroe's vessel, and everyone carried both medical equipment and powerful defensive weapons. The galaxy had learned that humans would protect their healers, and now everyone knew the cost of attacking them. Years later, when alien children learned about galactic history, they were taught about the day when humans showed the universe that some things are sacred. Medical personnel, refugees, and the wounded were not fair targets for war. Those who violated this rule would face the united fury of humanity. The story spread to the farthest reaches of known space. In distant star systems, alien parents told their children about the humans, who valued healers so much that they would travel across the galaxy to avenge them. Pirates and raiders learned to avoid any ship flying the white cross of medical neutrality, knowing that attacking such vessels would bring down the wrath of the entire human species. Admiral Stone's final report became one of the most famous documents in galactic history. It was simple and direct, just like the man who wrote it. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, nor the most advanced. We do not have the best weapons or the fastest ships. But we are the only species that will cross the void to avenge those who heal rather than harm. We are the only species that considers medical personnel to be as valuable as our greatest warriors. Let that be our legacy among the stars. The legacy endured. Decades later, when new species joined the galactic community, they were told about the Monroe Protocols and the humans who created them. They learned that in this galaxy those who chose to heal others were protected by laws backed by the most determined military force in known space. Dr. Lisa Monroe and her team had died trying to save alien children, but their deaths changed the universe forever. Medical personnel across the galaxy now worked under the protection of laws written in their honor. The White Cross of medical neutrality became